most people, let me just say this. Most people are going to be very unpleasant in the comments. I'm sure this will be one of those videos that just has bad comment after bad comment after bad comments. And it's just going to be full of hatred and anger and I'm upset because you didn't agree with me. Yo, welcome back to another Bible study with me. My name is Adam Jordan Clark, and today we are going over Matthew chapter 24. I put a little suspense in there because, my God in heaven, this is like the biggest, popular, like most talked about chapter in the entire Bible. I mean, my God in heaven, it's massive. It's massive. And I'll be honest with you. This passage is so big, and there's so many people who get so angry when they don't affirm their beliefs. In other words, there are people on the internet and there are people out there in churches who have their beliefs, and they want someone else to come along and affirm what they believe about it. And whenever they don't, they get upset. So here's what I did for many, many, many years. I just never talked about Matthew chapter 24. I mean, in all honesty, I put out, so far on YouTube, I think I've put out about 50 videos. And almost all of them have been about eschatology, or a lot of them have been about eschatology, the end times. And believe it or not, this is the first video I've ever done on Matthew chapter 24. Can you believe that? That's impressive. Wow, a dude's been talking about eschatology. He's put out, I think I put out like 12 or 13 or 14 videos on eschatology. And out of all of them, I never talked about Matthew chapter 24. I mean, that's it. That's just, that's mind-blowing. Guys, I'm telling you, that is like monumental. That's something you put on your wall. I'll have to make a statue for myself, a little plaque, and stick it up there. Dude, does 15 hours of eschatology and never talks about Matthew chapter 24. That is a thumbs up. Give this video a like because that was absolutely incredible to do. So, unfortunately, I have to talk about Matthew chapter 24 today because we're doing a Bible study on the entire Gospel of Matthew, and we've done every single chapter except Matthew chapter 24, because today is the 24th day that we're doing this study, and it just so happens to be chapter 24 because we've done chapter every day. And, by the way, there are only 28 chapters in Matthew's Gospel, which tells you what? There are only 4 chapters left. And guess what, guys? Jesus hasn't been arrested yet, and he hasn't died yet. So we're coming up on his death. Spoiler alert, actually, the next chapter over is chapter 25, is full of a whole bunch of parables that are connected to this end time stuff in Matthew 24, just so you know. And Matthew 23, we just did a video yesterday on Matthew 23. If you didn't watch that one, go watch it, because you won't understand this one unless you understand that one, because we talked a lot about the disciples. But anyways, Matthew chapter 26 and 27 and 28, those 3 chapters out of this entire gospel just talks about Jesus getting arrested and dying and rising again and giving the Great Commission. That's it. I mean, it's like, wow, we've waited this long for just to find out this? The dude dies? So it's been an incredible story. I really hope that for those of you who have followed this series, I hope that you have enjoyed this. And I hope it's been enlightening, particularly if you've never went through the entire gospel. I just hope that you've learned something, and I hope that it's created a joy inside of you. And I hope that what it's really done is it's shown you that reading the Bible is really easy, and it's really fun, and you learn a lot of stuff, and it changes your perspective on God and the Bible and everything else. And I just hope that you have fun in this series. Really, I do. I hope that you have fun, and particularly in this video, I hope you have fun, because we're talking about a controversial passage today, and I may or may not talk about those controversies. Who knows? Also, by the way, I said this in the last video, and I'll say it again in this video in case I forget. Preterism is heresy. And I did a whole video on it. It's called Preterism is Heresy. It's up here. You can click it and go watch it if you want to. I'm sure there are a lot of people from the preterist crowd who clicked on this video and said, I gotta watch this and see if this guy's a preterist or not a preterist. And look, dude, I don't like I think preterism is heresy. You can click the video up here and you can go watch that video and comment there if you want to. And you get upset there if you want to. I personally don't care. Also, you can go to Matthew chapter 23 and you can watch that video too. And you can get just as upset over that video. But before you do, let me just tell you something. Jesus predicted the temple, and that temple was destroyed, the destruction of the temple, and that temple was destroyed in 70 AD. That's recorded in Mark 13, Luke 21, and Matthew chapter 24. All futurists agree on that point. So, I don't know why you preterists are so upset. I really don't know. But anyways, we are going to do Matthew chapter 24 today, and we're going to try and make this video short. And believe it or not, we're going to try and avoid the controversies. Really, the only reason why I mentioned the preterist is to make some people upset. Because the people in their crowd, my God in heaven, they get so upset. They get so upset. They say, you don't agree with me. No, I don't agree with you. You people are crazy. You can't make up your mind on what's literal or what's allegory. You have no idea what you're talking about. You people are just crazy. You know, you'll see in this passage, the gathering of elect, that's spiritual, but the stones are real, and the generation is real. Blah, 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 blah. By the way, he is talking to that generation, just so you know. It confuses people because people hear me say that, and they're like, wait a second. On one hand, you're saying you're a futurist. On the other hand, you're saying a preterist. So that makes you a partial preterist. They say, no, I'm not a partial preterist. I'm not a preterist of any kind. Because I think all preterism is heresy. And so this really confuses people. Let me just make this clear. I did a whole video on this, and this is very important. All joking aside, this is very, very important. You should watch it. It's called Preterism versus Futurism. And what I do in this video is I show you how partial preterism is not preterism. It's futurism. Okay? It's very important to understand that. The preterists have muddied the water, and they've messed up the terminology. And so now there are a lot of people out there who are calling themselves partial preterists. And they're actually futurists because they agree with everything futurists believe. Let me just bring you up to date real quick in case you don't know. Futurists believe that Jesus predicted the temple and the destruction, the temple being destroyed that occurred in 70 AD. Okay, all futurists believe that. They also believe that Mark 13, Luke 21, and Matthew 24 record Jesus predicting the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. I mean, all futurists believe that. All you got to do is go and type in the Dome of the Rock. There's no temple there. Obviously, it was destroyed. And you read Jesus' writings, and he says, not one stone will be left upon another. My God in heaven. What are we doing? You know, this is why I'm doing a YouTube channel, folks. That's why I do a YouTube channel, because I looked at the church. I looked at the church and I said, oh my God, there's just so much bad information out there. There are so many people who lack education, and there are so many pastors who are just poisoning people's minds. Poisoning people's minds because they refuse to teach out of the Bible. They refuse to preach out of the Bible. Of all things, I mean, you go to a church, it's the place you read the Bible. That's the place where you should find so much about the Bible. That's where you should find the truth of God. And yet you go to these churches and you find nothing but nothingness, emptiness, deceitfulness. That's all you find there. It's terrible. So I started a YouTube channel because I wanted to educate people. I wanted to give people knowledge. I wanted to help people increase. There are a lot of people out there who are searching for the truth of God, and it's my goal to give them truth. It's my goal to help them understand some history about the Bible, some theology about the Bible, and ultimately grow in their Christian walk, grow in their spirituality, and become closer to God. So if you're looking for a really good Bible study, go ahead and click subscribe, because this is a legit Bible study. And we talk about crazy stuff here, guys. Not the stuff you hear in church. I mean, crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the text. But before we do, here's this ungodly, ugly picture that I always put up in every single one of my videos on the Gospel of Matthew. This is an ugly picture of Matthew chapter 24. I mean, come on, you have to agree. At least write a comment and say, you're right. That picture is absolutely ugly. Because it is ugly. Just look at it. It's horrible. Anyways, this is Matthew chapter 24. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to read the whole thing. And then after we do, we're going to talk about it. But let me tell you, it's going to take a while to read this because it's a little over 50 verses. So there's a lot of stuff happening here. But keep in mind that in chapter 23, Jesus got all pissed off at the religious leaders, and he gave a speech. And by the way, I want to ask you a question. If you watched chapter 23 that I did, the video before this one, do you remember what I told you about the disciples? Do you remember what I asked you about? Okay, what did I tell you? I said, look, the very first verse, it says, and Jesus was standing there. He spoke to the crowds, the disciples, the teachers of the law, and the Pharisees, and he delivered this angry speech and said, you people are going to hell. That's basically what he said. All hell broke loose, basically, and this is why they killed Jesus, by the way. So I told you to read chapter 23, and we read it. And what did I tell you to do? I said, look for the disciples. How many times do you see them in there? They're not there. It's like they just disappear. It's like, whew. Now all of a sudden we're going to see here in Matthew chapter 24, when you flip the page, you see in Matthew chapter 24, the disciples say, Lord, what are you talking about? That's what we're going to read here now. So, beginning in verse 1, here's what it says. Jesus left the temple and was walking away. Oh, by the way, let me just tell you, before we read this part, I also want to make this point clear. When Jesus, in Matthew 23, over there, okay, on the other side of your Bible, Matthew chapter 23, where's Jesus at? He's in the temple. He's in the temple courts, and he gives this speech. In the temple! Okay? As they're leaving, the disciples say, hey, dude, what about these buildings? And Jesus says, oh, not one stone will be left upon another. He says that in Jerusalem. Then they take a hike up onto the ridge, which is called the Mount of Olives, the Olivet Discourse, which is the rest of the passage we're getting ready to read here, right? So we're going to see that they're in Jerusalem. They ask the question, when will these, or they ask the question, what are you talking about, Jesus? And he says, not one stone will be left upon another. He predicts the destruction of Jerusalem in Jerusalem. He's standing in the temple courts, and he says that. This didn't happen on the Mount of Olives. It happened in Jerusalem. The rest of the speech happens on the Mount of Olives. It's very important to understand that. You have to get that distinction. You must understand it. It's very important. It's a very, very important historical point. So, let's read the passage. Verse 1, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to the building. Do you see all these buildings, he asked. Truly, I tell you, not one stone will be left upon another. Everyone will be thrown down. So here in verse 3, it says, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives. So in other words, Jesus is in Jerusalem in verses 1 and 2, and then they walk out of the city and they go up to the Mount of Olives, which is a ridge overlooking the city. So beginning in verse 3, here's what it reads. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then You will be handed over and persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from my faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So, when you see in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetops go down to take anything out of the houses. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, there he is, out in the wilderness, do not go out there. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe them. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Whenever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds and from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it is written, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days, before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be standing in the field, one will be taken and the other one left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, and one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know or what day the Lord will come. But understand this. If the owner of the house had known what time the thief was coming, he would have kept watch, and he would have not let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of his servants in his household to give them food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away for a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at that hour he is not aware of. He will cut him into pieces and assign him to be with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That is the entire reading of Matthew chapter 24. And for those of you who have never read this chapter entirely, congratulations, you finally have heard the entire chapter read to you. Or you read it yourself, at least, in one sitting. So, amazing. Congratulations. I'm glad you made it. Wow. I mean, this is an amazing passage. When you read chapter 23 and then you read Matthew 24, and tomorrow we're going to read chapter 25, and we're going to get into that. But you have to understand, Matthew 23, Matthew 24, and Matthew 25 are all one conversation, right? It's just one whole talk of Jesus. Big Jesus talk, right? One big Jesus talk. And it's important to understand what's actually happening here. To go back up to the top, there is a split in the text. And there's a split in geography, or the split is geographical, rather. So this passage here in verse 1, it says, Jesus left the temple. So where is the temple? Well, the temple's in Jerusalem. Okay? So Jesus left the temple, but he's still in Jerusalem, because it says, and was walking away when his disciples came to him to call his attention to the buildings. Which buildings? All the buildings surrounding them. Okay? So they're in Jerusalem, and Jesus says to them, while they're in Jerusalem, do you see all these things? He asked, truly I tell you, not one stone will be left upon another every one will be thrown down. Now, here's what happens. Between verses 2 and 3, there is a split that happens. Right here, something happens in geography. I'm not exactly sure what happens, but something happens, and they go for a little walk to the Mount of Olives. Now, the Mount of Olives is it's a little ridge that's overlooking the city. So it's outside the city of Jerusalem. You can look it up today. It's actually a Jewish seminary. I did a whole video on this called the Mount of Olives. You can go and look it up if you want to. It'll be linked up here below, so you can click on it and go watch it. I explain the geography, and I explain the split. The reason why I explain this split is because it's super, 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 super important to understand for lots of reasons. One, you have some geography. Number two, you have some history, and you got some theology, and you basically have all this stuff going on. As a Bible expositor, and Bible expositor or exposition basically means interpreter, okay? As a Bible interpreter, when you see these things in the text, these splits where it's talking about something that switches way over there, just like that. It's very concerning. Very concerning. And people who know these things are like, yes, it's very concerning. The reason why they're concerning is because they shift so much. And there's missing information. So somehow or way, they go from Jerusalem to the Mount of Olives. They just walk, and it doesn't tell you that they walked there. They showed up at the Mount of Olives. It just says, as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives. And so these little things are very concerning. Given that the fact that both of these speeches are very important. And in one of these videos, I mentioned something. Now, this is where I'm going to get in trouble. All the little comment warriors down there are going to get all pissed off at me. You people are going to get upset. So get ready to be upset, okay? Some dude on the internet's going to hurt your feelings, and now you got to cry about it. All right, so anyways, I mentioned this in another video. And it's a hard thing to talk about because it's very difficult to explain. And not only is it very difficult to explain, but it's also very difficult to understand. And primarily the reason why it's difficult to understand and explain is because the church world is so dominant in this area. I mean, my God in heaven, you look at Christian publication, Christian books. I mean, this is the most published topic in the most published subject out of all Christian topics. And what I'm about to say is not good. Okay, it's not good. It really hurts people's feelings. And I understand that. So, given the fact that I understand that, I think it's a good idea for you to understand, to at least try to understand what it is that I'm saying. In other words, don't jump to conclusions. Listen to what I'm saying and understand what I'm saying in context, or at least the best context that I'm able to provide. So here's the thing. I said in a couple other videos that I think that Jesus was arrested in Jerusalem. Because the narrative that goes on from out here is that Jesus was in Jerusalem. He says not once. He gives this speech. He says, "You brood of vipers, you hypocrites, blah, 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 blah." Then he's leaving and he says, "Hey, not one stone will be left upon another." Then they leave the city and they go out to the Mount of Olives. They're up on the Mount of Olives. He's asked these questions. And then he starts praying. In the meantime, Judas betrays Jesus. Okay? Somehow or way, Judas doesn't go to the Mount of Olives. He stays in Jerusalem, finds the Jewish leaders and says, "Hey guys, I'll tell you where he's hanging out," which doesn't really make sense. But anyways, apparently Judas knew where they were going, and he betrays them, and so they go and arrest Jesus while he's up there, okay? What I'm saying is that historically, I'm not quite sure that actually happens, okay? And I know this is going to get me in trouble, and people are going to get upset. I understand. I think that Jesus was probably arrested in Jerusalem when he gave that speech. It's better understood in Mark's gospel. It's better to read Mark's gospel to understand this point. But I think that Jesus was in Jerusalem and he said some bad stuff, and they got all pissed off at him, and they said, "You know what? We're going to arrest this dude." And they arrested him. And I think that they arrested him, and then they had him killed. That's what I think happened. So this raises a big problem. Okay? The big problem is, what do you do about this speech that happens on Mount of Olives? What do you do about that? It's like you're saying he got arrested, so are you saying the speech never happened? And again, this is where things get very complicated. Because things get very complicated when you read the Gospels. Number one, I think it's important to understand about the Gospels is that they're not written, there's no chronology in the Bible, mostly. Sometimes there is from verse to verse or passage to passage, but other times there isn't. There's really no chronology. And sometimes random passages are just thrown out. They just are. So, for example, Jesus is arrested. He goes into the temple and cleanses the temple. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all put that at the end of their Gospels. John, on the other hand, puts it at the beginning of the Gospel. Why? Well, because there's not a lot of chronology. So, I think that if the speech is legit, if it actually did happen, put it that way, it probably didn't happen after Jesus was arrested in Jerusalem. Now, of course, that's all based upon the idea that Jesus actually was arrested in Jerusalem. It may be that the Bible is actually telling you the truth in this area, or Matthew's telling you the truth in this area, that he really did not get arrested and that he went up to Mount of Olives, gave this speech, all this stuff happened, yada, 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 and then what happens? Well, he gets arrested. Because look, here's the problem, is that, let me just step back for a second. All right, so first of all, when you go to church, these narratives are already planned out for you. They're already pre-planned, and you go to church and you're indoctrinated into them, okay? That's literally what happens. You're indoctrinated in these things. As a historian, you don't go with those narratives because you understand history, you understand historiography and things of that nature, and you go, well, what is that again? Blah, 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 blah. Let's look at this a little bit differently. Let's look at it as a historian. So that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at this stuff a little bit more historically than what most people do. So understand that point. I'm trying to build context here, so don't get all upset too quick. Trying to look at this from a historical perspective, and we do have some problems historically. The biggest problem is Judas. Okay, if you're going to say that Judas hung himself, you're also going to have to argue that he betrayed Jesus. But if you're going to say he betrayed Jesus, then when and how did he do it? At what point did he betray Jesus? Was he there with the 12 on the Mount of Olives when Jesus gave this speech? Did he do it in Jerusalem? Did he do it when they first came into Jerusalem? When did Judas betray Jesus? And the answer is the Gospels don't tell us. And what I'm trying to tell you is that when you start reading the Bible historically, you start looking for these things and you start asking these types of questions. And what you realize is that the Bible doesn't give you these answers. The Gospels don't tell you these things. And why they don't tell us, we don't know. We just know that they don't tell us. And so you have to do something. You have to understand these stories in a particular way. And if there is a chronology, which I'm not really sure there is, but if there is one, you have to understand it at some level. So you have these big questions to deal with. So understand, it's not just about saying when Jesus was arrested or when he was not arrested, or that the speech happened or that the speech didn't happen. It's not just that. It's not that black and white. There's all kinds of other stuff that's happening here. What about Pilate? Where's Pilate at? Is he trying to kill Jesus? How does he view Jesus? Does he know about Jesus? Are there other stories that the Gospels don't tell us about Jesus? Is he viewed as an insurrectionist? That's another big thing. Does Pilate see him as an insurrectionist? Keep in mind, this is during a holiday, so Pilate's definitely there, okay? And he's trying to keep the peace. Jesus is coming in saying, the kingdom of God is at hand. You know, that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying that he's the king. People are saying he's the king. That's a threat to Rome. So is he killed because of that? These are the things that historians think about. You don't think about these things in your church, okay? You don't, because nobody talks about them. But historians do. Bible scholars think about these things. Theologians think about these things because they're important. They're important to us. They might not be important to you, but they're important to us. So what I'm saying is that I'm not coming to a belief where I'm saying, yes, he was arrested, or no, he wasn't arrested. What I'm ultimately saying is that I think there is a possibility, even though I'm not presenting the case here, I'm saying I think there's a possibility that Jesus was arrested in Jerusalem. Now keep in mind, he says not one stone will be left upon another while he's in Jerusalem. He doesn't do it on the Mount of Olives. So for everybody who gets upset about this, they're like, "Oh my God, you're going crazy." Whatever those people are going to say, I don't care. Think about this for a second. Jesus predicts the destruction of Jerusalem in Jerusalem. You don't need the speech on the Mount of Olives. But if you go back a little bit and you remember what I told you, the Mount of Olives is a significant place. That speech is planned. I've mentioned this before, even in my video on the Mount of Olives. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. The speech that Jesus gives on the Mount of Olives is planned. It's either planned by Jesus himself or it's planned by a gospel writer. I don't know which one it is, you tell me. But somebody planned for that speech to happen on that mountain. That's how significant the speech is. The other thing is this, the speech didn't actually need to happen. All you need is that one stone will be not left on another. This whole city is going to be destroyed. That's what that statement means. The disciples knew that. Keep in mind, we just read chapter 23 yesterday. What does he tell these people? He says, you're all going to die. You're all going to go to hell. You're all going to die. God's going to kill all you people because of what you've been doing. You rejected God. You rejected the prophets. Now God's going to kill you. That's what he tells them in the speech. And then as he's leaving after that speech, the disciples come to him and say, Lord, look at these great buildings. Jesus says, not one stone will be left upon another. Everyone will be thrown down. All these buildings will be destroyed. There's your prediction. The speech doesn't need to happen. It's not necessary. But for some reason, it's in Mark and Matthew and Luke. My question is, why? Why is it there? And my question is historical. It's not theological. It's historical. Okay, it's a historical question. I know it's hard to understand, but it's a historical question. It doesn't need to be there. And so because it doesn't need to be there, it very much opens up my mind to think it doesn't need to be there. It makes me literally think that it shouldn't be there. And so it's very confusing. It's a very confusing thing. But anyways, this is stuff you don't have to worry about. This is stuff you don't have to worry about thinking about. But if you have ever thought about this, go ahead and let me know in the comments. It's very difficult stuff to think about. But that portion is definitely there, for sure. You cannot deny that. He's in Jerusalem. He says, not one stone will be left upon another. Then all of a sudden he's up on the Mount of Olives. And he gives a speech. And you don't need that speech. You don't need it. But there is a geographic difference. Why is there a geographic difference? Why is there some historical, I don't want to call them discrepancies, but I'll call them whatever that means, fuzziness, if you will. Why is that? Why is there, why do you see significant theology, but you don't see significant history? Why is that? So, stuff to think about. By the way, I can guarantee you this, when you landed on this video, you never, ever, ever thought you'd hear somebody say, well, I don't think that speech happened. I'm sure you didn't expect that. And you know what? That's another reason why you should subscribe to this channel, because we talk about all the stuff that nobody else is talking about. Our goal is to educate people. There's a saying, we quote it all the time here. It says, knowledge is power. But the only way to get that power is if you have the willpower to obtain that knowledge. It's not just about going to church, listening to some pastor, some Bible teacher, or some theologian or some scholar tell you something's true and then ram it down your throat and then you believe it and spit it back out your mouth tomorrow. It's not about that. It's about learning. And learning is a process, and you have to think about new things. You have to be challenged. You have to be put in uncomfortable positions. And that's really what I've tried to do in this video, is put you in a very uncomfortable position. I've tried to challenge what you believe. Whether you're a futurist or a preterist, basically what I've shown you in this passage is that there's so much more here to talk about. There's so much more here to think about. We talked about history. We talked about some geography. We talked about some theology. And yet I'm pretty sure most of you have never thought about these types of things. I'm pretty sure you've never talked about these types of things. I'll even bet you've never read about these things, because most people don't do these things. Most people don't do these kinds of studies. Most people are basically dispensational, and they shove dispensational down your throat. Or they're preterists or partial preterists, and they shove it down your throat. And neither one of them are right. Neither one of them knows what they're talking about. They don't see these types of things in text because they don't want to. So the point of the matter is that this is a channel you should subscribe to if you're interested in really learning different things about the Bible. If you're really interested in knowledge and growing in biblical knowledge and learning about what scholars type to think, or learning how scholars think, rather, this is the channel for you. 100%, this is the channel for you. Click subscribe. You're not going to find another channel on the internet. You're not going to find another YouTube channel like this anywhere else. That is a fact. You're not going to find anybody else like me in the world. You're just not. I mean, there's only one of me, and here I am. So, click subscribe. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. That thing, the like button, hit the like. I think it's on this side. Like the thing. Also, comment below, and I'm sure you're not. Most people, let me just say this. Most people are going to be very unpleasant in the comments. I'm sure this will be one of those videos that just has bad comment after bad comment after bad comments. And it's just going to be full of hatred and anger and I'm upset because you didn't agree with me. Whatever it is. It's not going to be good. I'm 100% sure nobody's going to comment and be like, wow, I think you're right. I don't think anybody's going to do that. So if you are that one person, high five in the air, because you're probably the person I'll talk to the most. So, yeah. But comment below anyways. If you're upset, if you're really upset, you didn't like this video and I hurt your feelings and you're really hurt about it, comments. I'm not a communist, okay? I firmly believe you should be able to say what you want. You should be able to express your opinion, and I want you to express your opinion. I literally believe, like this is my belief, that Bible interpretation is best done in community. There is no one interpretation. And the fact that there is more than one interpretation tells you that there's more than one way of reading the Bible. So go ahead and comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your interpretation is. Tell me what you think about verses 1 to 2 and 3 in this geographic difference. Tell me what you think about this stuff historically. I want to know. I want to read what you have to say. Even if you disagree, I want to read what you have to say. Perhaps you could find some type of persuasion. Maybe you could provide some type of evidence that might be persuasive. Who knows? But go ahead and comment below. Anyways, tomorrow we're going to be doing Matthew chapter 25, and it's going to be an amazing chapter because we're going to continue in this discourse, and it's going to be fun. And then a couple chapters later, we're going to read about Jesus getting arrested, and then he's died, and he's put on a cross, and then he rises from the dead, and then he tells his disciples, go and preach the gospel and make disciples and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. My name is Adam Jordan Clark. This is my YouTube channel. Click subscribe if you have not already. Give it a thumbs up. Comment below. And as always, I will see you in the next video. If you like this video and want to know more, you can hit the subscribe button for more videos. If you have a question or a comment, or maybe you just like to say something or express your opinion, go ahead and comment that below. And like the video if you like the video, because liking the video is always a good thing when you like the video. My name is Adam Jordan Clark, and you can find out more about me if you like at my website, adamjordanclark.com. And as always, I will see you in the next video.